Hi everyone and welcome to the Colour Cave, and this is where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and today I'm going to have a bit of a play about with the Derwent Graphitint pencils. If you don't know what Graphitint pencils are, they are a water soluble pencil, a bit like a watercolour pencil, but they are infused, I suppose was the word that you'd use, with graphite. So when you use them dry, they look quite dull and they give you a really sort of muted pencil drawing with a hint of pigment. When you add water to them, they just sort of go whoomph. So they're pretty spectacular. There's 24 colours in the full set, so it's quite a limited palette, and you're never going to get a bright, vibrant picture. So I wanted to take advantage of that and paint something from nature that would lend itself to those colours. So I'm just going to grab the pencils and we can get going. So before commencing what will be the finished piece, I did do a little bit of groundwork beforehand. The first thing I did was go into Google Images and look up some pictures of some sea turtles because I have never seen one in the flesh. And based on that, I did a couple of rough sketches in my little sketchbook here. I'll find the page. And it was really just to get a feel for the shape of him and some of the sort of finer details. So you can see there I've had a little go at some of the patterns on him and where his little lines are and all the rest of it, and I tried out some flippers and things as well, and that's really just to give me a bit of confidence before going on to the final piece. So the next step after the sketches was I consulted my little swatch book here, and you can see here these are my Graphitint pencils all swatched out in this little row here. I have them in the dry original form but also when they've been activated by water as well, because it does give a much truer representation of the colour just due to the graphite being sort of pushed out the way by the pigment when you activate it with water. So off the back of that, I have got a plan of the colours I'm going to use for the various aspects of my picture. So that is me. I am ready to rock now and get on with sketching the final picture. Let's go. Generally people tape down their pictures so that when they apply water it helps to stop the page buckling. I am using multimedia paper because I'm working in pencil that just happens to be activated by water. The main reason, and I'm not going to lie about this, the main reason that I tape down my paper is actually to stop me turning it and moving it about while I'm filming, because quite a lot of the time I have realised that I am out of shot particularly when I'm sketching, because I'm quite concentrated on my efforts. So this is actually for your benefit, guys. It's not actually an arty-farty thing in my book, but I'm sure you'll appreciate my honesty. And it's these kinds of things though that, it's not going to improve your drawing if you want to try something similar. It doesn't improve my drawing, but it's just interesting to know that I do things for my viewers. Don't say I'm not good to you guys. Anyway. So it is now quite late on in the evening when I'm doing this voiceover, and I am starting to get very tired. So I'm going to do my best to talk you through this and just explain a little bit about what I'm doing. So at the sketching stage, obviously having done the thumbnail type practice sketches in my sketchbook, this stage was pretty straightforward. I am just using a Common or Garden 2B pencil. It's a W.H. Smith one that I've got there, which is just our local stationer and it's their own brand, and it did the job just fine. One of the things I did want to do was to sort of pencil in some sort of rocky background, and in retrospect I wish I'd positioned it slightly differently, and you'll see why near the end of the video, but I just didn't have the foresight at this point to do it, which was a bit of a shame because I think it's probably one of the few regrets I actually have about this picture. Because I'd done a few of those practice sketches, the sketching stage went fairly quickly, and most of you will know it's something that I've struggled with quite a lot in the past, is having the confidence to commit to those final sketch lines. I'm glad to see that that is improving. So here I'm going in with the Graphitint pencils, and I had two shades for the water, which you can see that I'm starting to fill in here. I had a sort of dark greeny blue and a very dark steel blue. I think steel blue, was that the colour it was? Anyway, it was kind of like more like an indigo type shade, and I used that just to get a bit of definition, some ripples in the water. I also left quite a lot of white space. I did try with the white pencil to see what that was going to do. I just put a blob down there and it did absolutely nothing. So I learned quite quickly that the best way to have that contrast was actually just to leave the paper bare and leave it alone. And when I was using my water brush, be careful not to smoosh over those bare patches so that I could just get that nice sort of watery effect. I was actually quite chuffed with the water, it looked kind of good. I wish I'd continued that sort of texture and pattern right down the right hand side of the page as well. But it might have looked a bit odd because you're kind of, you know, coming up to the terrain, as it were, under the water. So in with the water brush. I was quite careful here about where I was leaving my brush strokes. I did want a little bit of the brush stroke texture just to help give that nice sort of ripply water effect, but I didn't want it to be really streaky. The good thing about these Derwent pencils is that you can keep manipulating them with water even after they're dry. If you go back over with a water brush again, with a clean brush, you can still move the pigment round on the paper. The other good thing about that is it means as well, if you have an area that's too dark, you can actually lift off some of the pigment, and if you clean your brush in between every stroke, you can actually take off quite a lot of the pigment, and it lets you correct things or lighten things up, which is really nice. The downside to it is that if you want to layer colours, it becomes quite difficult because every time you activate the next layer with water, it does affect the layer underneath, even if it's dry, because it is not permanent. So you have to bear that in mind, and you really have to make the choices. And you can see what I did there, using the two types of pencils and then going over them with the water brush separately so that I had that definition and those nice sort of dark and light lines. So that's something to kind of bear in mind if you do want to use them. One thing that I did do, again you'll see it later on, is after I'd activated the pencils with water, to add a bit of definition, a bit of texture, I went back over with the pencil but kept it dry. And that's a technique that works really well with these pencils. This is probably one of my favourite parts, doing the snout. The pencil itself looks like a really boring grey colour, and then when you add the water to it, it just pops out. It is so nice, and it's just a really nice rich colour. The technique I was talking about there, about lifting paint off the page, I actually did it here on the sort of more right hand side of his snout, and that was just to make it a little bit more 3D and just give it a bit of sort of contrast as well. I'm pretty sure I'll do that not long after I filled that bit in. And I got a nice little gradient there as well. Yeah, you can see that's me doing it there. I'm just trying to lift a little bit of that colour off, and it's giving me that nice sort of stripe down the middle. Moving on here, I started to put in some of the detail, and drawing it in pencil is what took the time. However, you can pretty much just squish the colour down in the general area that you want it, and then use your water brush or your paintbrush dipped in water to manipulate and move that colour about. I did start being quite sort of anally retentive about the white gaps between the little plates on his head and on his shell, and I realised that I didn't have to get them that close together because I could push the pencil over with the water brush so that they were almost touching. So once I kind of got my head around that, I was like far less careful, and I was just like slapping down the pencil everywhere and then taking my time more with the water brush. That was great fun. It's really nice to be quite haphazard with pencils, and you know, just know that you can worry about it later with your water brush. So that was quite interesting, and it made it really good fun, and I really did enjoy doing this, just because it felt so forbidden and slapdash, but it actually wasn't, and the end result was actually fairly good. I was quite pleased with it. I had to really sort of fight with my patience here when I started doing the flippers. They're made up of so many tiny segments. There isn't really a pattern to them other than the sort of back part of the flipper. You know, when I say the back part, I mean the section that faces the back of the turtle. And although I was having great fun using that sort of haphazard, let's just chuck the pencil down and I can make all these little funky shapes, having to do it repeatedly that many times and then go back over it with the water brush, I really had to discipline myself. I don't have a lot of patience for repetitive things like that. It's one of the reasons why I don't like colouring in mandalas and patterns. Anyway, that's completely beside the point. Yeah, so I really fought with myself, and I did like half of that flipper, and I went away and made myself a cup of tea and then came back and did the other half. So I was quite relieved to get onto the shell. And again, it's the same sort of technique now that I've used on the head, and by this point, as I say, I'd figured out that I didn't have to be too accurate with how far apart the plates were on the shell, because I was able to push that ink up with the water brush, so that was pretty cool as well. So I'm just sort of making my way around the edge of the shell here, and that was just so that I had that nice defined line and I could figure out where the rest of the plates were going to go and where they were going to meet and that sort of thing. With the plates on the shell, I started off trying to sort of mix and blend 2 or 3 different shades, and it didn't really give me the desired effect that I wanted. It looked okay when it was in pencil like that, but when I started to activate it with water, I couldn't get it to blend right, and all the reference photos that I looked at of sea turtles, their shells were quite sort of battered and scratched, and there was a lot of lines and sort of mottled parts and things like that, and I really couldn't capture it just using the one layer of pencil and then the water brush over the top. It kind of looks like a really bad set of 70s bathroom tiles at this point, and I really wasn't happy with it at all. And I just sat there and looked at it, and this is me looking at it, I'm just looking at it while I'm doing other things. My eye kept creeping back up to it and thinking, no, I can't leave it like that. Do you know what I mean? It looks like a bad terracotta kitchen floor. Anyway, I went on to the other flipper, much to my joy, and exactly the same process as before. Didn't stop in the middle to make a cup of tea this time though, so I'd obviously managed to suck it up by that point and get on with it. It was just, again, that random pattern. Apart from that back row of scales, I pretty much just popped in little spots of black and brown where I saw fit, and then squished it about a bit with a water brush, and the result was pretty good. I was quite happy with that too. And here we are back for another do at the shell to see if we can get rid of that terrible tiled effect. And in my mind at this point, I did want to go back over this with the water brush. I just felt that the colours were quite flat and weren't rich enough, so I'm adding in a bit more of that autumn red and just a few kind of more textured lines, and just to start sort of building up that slightly more mottled and sort of battle scarred look. So I wasn't entirely pleased with the shell, like, you know, with the finished article, and I think if I could redo it, I would just put a layer of flat colour, one colour, and activate it with the water brush, and then really work hard with the pencils dry to get all the detail and the texture in. And it's one of those things, I tried at one point to lift some of the pencil off, you know, as I did with the snout, but there was too much down on the paper to do anything with, so that was a bit of a shame. So I think that's probably one thing that I would, if I had a do-over, I would do differently. Back to making little black dots. Once again, kind of losing the will to live for this, to be honest. But the picture was coming along really nicely at this point, so that kind of like motivated me to keep going. And I decided I would finish off all the dotty parts, so I moved straight on to his little bit at the back there. I don't know whether it's a tail or I think it might be his back foot or one of his back feet. I don't know. Back flipper, back foot. Anyway, I decided to do that, and then that was all the sort of black dotty stuff done, and it rounded off and finished off the turtle himself, and I could move on to the rocks and the bottom of the terrain after that. This was really just a random sort of let's just stick in a couple of colours, make them remotely rock shaped and fling the water brush over them and just see what happens and see how good or bad it looks. And that is the absolute and honest truth. Again, I'm not a particularly experienced artist, and I just wanted to kind of like have a play about with these. In my mind at this point, I had this down. Mr. Sea Turtle was done. He was looking okay. It turned out reasonably well, so this was just sort of like let's fill the rest of the page. So I had a bit of a play about with how much of the colour I could pull out with the water brush, you know, how far I could actually stretch it before it disappeared into nothing and I was just putting water on the, you know, a blank part of the page. So I spent a bit of time messing about with that. After doing that first little section there, I decided that I should have some sort of greenery in there, and it was just for a bit of contrast as well next to the turtle, because I didn't really want him melting into the rocks. So I decided to add in a little bit of green, and it gave it an extra kind of pop of colour as well. So I was quite pleased with the outcome of that, and I had 2 shades of green as well, so I was able to mix it up a little bit and just, you know, so that it wasn't really samey. And I think that turned out okay as well. After getting to this point, I decided to crack open the Derwent Lightfast pencils. The only problem, it's not even a problem, the thing about the Derwent Graphitint pencils is that because they are graphite combined with pigment, you have quite a limited colour palette. They are all earthy colour, well, they're mostly earthy colours, but they're also, there are no pale colours apart from white. And I felt that Mr. Turtle was kind of melting into the background at this point. So I took a kind of sandy coloured pencil and I decided that I was going to use that to fill in the white space on his head and his flippers. And again, it was just to sort of pull him out from the background because there's a lot of browns and greys going on there. And again, if I had a do-over, I would probably have used less colour in the rocks so that he stood out more. You know, I would have made it a bit more uniform, because I do feel that he kind of gets lost against that background. And as I said at the start, the positioning at his back end, I wish I'd brought the rocks in further so that the bottom of his shell and that back flipper were actually in the water, because the bottom half of them is just melting into the picture. And you can see here I've tried to put a bit of shadow in with a dark pencil to try and bring him out a little bit and make that definition between the, like, his chin and his neck and the rocks that are underneath. So that was a bit of a regret as well. I also decided to go back over for my sins, that back flipper with the pencil again, because I just felt that it was kind of fading away to nothing, and I wanted that to kind of pop out a bit more. So yeah, for my sins I went over all the dots again. Well, that is not a bad effort, even if I do say so myself. I'm quite pleased with Mr. Turtle. I really hope you've enjoyed watching me do this and following along if that's what you like to do. And do all the usual stuff. Leave us a like. Leave me a comment in the box below. I love getting your comments, and you know that I always try and get back to you when I can. So that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and we shall see you next time in the colour cave. Oh, There are links in the description to the materials that I have used for this picture, so if you fancy trying some of them yourself, you can find that down below also. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you soon in the colour cave. Bye for now.